So in the last video, we talked about Wyman's argument that mere possibilities exist and Quine's reply. Just a brief recap, Quine's reply goes like this. He says, if this argument is sound, then a parallel argument for the conclusion that mere impossibilities exist is also sound. That parallel conclusion is absurd, so that argument can't be sound. Therefore, this argument can't be sound. Basically, his idea is that this second premise here is unsupported, and therefore we should reject it because it presumes that meaningfulness requires existence. It connects meaningfulness to existence, but meaningfulness doesn't require existence. Okay. Wyman hears Quine's reply and says, okay, fair enough, I don't know how to reply to what you just said, but I do know this. I know that S1 is meaningful, and I don't see any way to make sense of S1 without presuming that Pegasus exists. So I'm not going to follow you yet, Quine. And Quine's going to now reply by trying to show how S1 can be meaningful even if Pegasus doesn't exist. And to do so, he's just going to pick up on Bertrand Russell's theory of descriptions, a theory that Russell himself used to reply to the kind of possibilia argument that we just associated with Wyman and historically was associated with Meinong. Okay, so here's the idea. Pegasus is a disguised description. It's shorthand for a description. Now, this should seem very familiar. This is like the idea that names are shorthand for descriptions that we found in Frege, that names are kind of have senses and that the senses determine reference. So Pegasus is a disguised description. It's short for something like the flying horse or the carrier of Zeus's lightning bolts or whatever. S1, Pegasus was birthed from Medusa's head, can therefore be rewritten by substituting that description for Pegasus, and we get the flying horse was birthed from Medusa's head. You can then analyze that sentence as follows. You can say something is a flying horse and was birthed from Medusa's head, and nothing else is a flying horse. That is, this sentence here, S1 double prime, really is the correct analysis of S1. And here's the key thing. The phrase the flying horse in this analysis here in S1 double prime is now part of the predicate is the flying horse. It's no longer a noun as it was in S1. The noun in S1, Pegasus, is gone. All of this is now moved into the predicate. What is the noun? It's something. So you can think of it like this. When we say something is a flying horse, when it was birthed from Medusa's head and nothing else is a flying horse, we're saying this. There exists an X such that X is a flying horse and was birthed from Medusa's head, and for all Y, if Y is a flying horse and was birthed from Medusa's head, then that Y equals the X we talked about in the previous expression. Why does this matter? Well, we can express our disagreement about whether Pegasus exists as follows. We all agree that many things exist. You just think that one of those things has the property of being a flying horse, and I think that none has that property. So now, rather than expressing our disagreement by saying you think Pegasus exists and I don't, where it looks like when I say I don't think Pegasus exists, I'm committing myself to the existence of Pegasus as a thing that has the property of non-existence. I'm now not saying I don't think Pegasus exists, where Pegasus is like an object of which I'm saying it doesn't exist. Instead, I'm just saying, look, I think lots of things exist. I agree with you about the things that exist. I just think none of those things has the property of being a flying horse, and you do. Here's now a passage where this is explained. Where descriptions are concerned, there is no longer any difficulty in affirming or denying being, existence. There is the author of Waverley, that description, is explained by Russell, remember I said this is Russell's theory of descriptions, as meaning someone, or more strictly something, wrote Waverley and nothing else wrote Waverley. That expression, negating expression, the author of Waverley is not, is explained correspondingly as the alteration, either each thing failed to write Waverley, that is each thing that actually exists failed to write Waverley, or two or more things wrote Waverley. So there is no unique author of Waverley. This alteration is false, but it's meaningful, and it contains no expression purporting to designate the author of Waverley. That is, it doesn't have an expression in the referring position that is the author of Waverley. Instead, that description moves out of the referring position into the predicate position. Their properties had by that to which you refer, rather than the thing being the thing to which you refer. So the old notion that statements of non-being defeat themselves goes by the board. It fails. When a statement of being or non-being is analyzed by Russell's theory, it ceases to contain any expression which even purports to name the alleged individual whose being is in question, so that the meaninglessness of the statement no longer can be thought to presuppose that there be such an entity. Sorry, the meaningfulness of a statement can't be taken to presuppose that there is such an entity. So when we come back here, Quine says, so contrary to 2, we can make sense of S1 without supposing that Pegasus exists. We do it via Russell's method. We simply need to recognize that the surface grammar of S1 is misleading. It looks like it has Pegasus in the referring position, but really it has X, a variable, something in the referring position, and then Pegasus becomes a property being attributed to that something. So on the surface, Pegasus looks like a noun, more specifically a name that denotes something, but really Pegasus is just a predicate, a disguised description. And descriptions don't name, they ascribe attributes to things that are named. So S1 asserts a false but meaningful claim that is meaningful even though Pegasus doesn't exist. That is, even though nothing has the attribute of being a flying horse. And Wyman then says, well, this might work for Pegasus, but what about names that have no associated description? Clearly, they can't be short for a description, yet we can use them in meaningful sentences. For example, maybe no one here knows who Perseus is. Nevertheless, you all understand what I mean when I say Perseus beheaded Medusa. And Quine says you're right that some terms may be so basic or so confused that there is no relevant description, but we can easily introduce one. So suppose there were no description for Pegasus. We could just introduce the predicate Pegasizes, or being Pegasus, and say, say this sentence means there is something that Pegasizes and was birthed from Medusa's head. Similarly, we can introduce the predicate Perseus-sizes, or being Perseus, and say someone Perseus-sizes, and that person was beheaded by Medusa, and no one else Perseus-sizes. And McX says, hold on, you're just shifting us from talk of objects to talk of properties. So now we get a bunch of properties that exist uninstantiated. Why does that not offend your taste for desert landscapes just as much as uninstantiated individuals would? Why is it better to think that there are uninstantiated properties than it is to think that there are uninstantiated individuals? So here I want you to see the idea. The idea is this. Quine is like, look, we can just talk about the property being Perseus, and that's better because we're not referring to Perseus anymore. So when we say, when we say like, Perseus lived to be 70 years old or whatever, and I want to say like, look, Perseus doesn't exist. You can't then say, oh, Perseus, you just committed yourself to his existence by saying he doesn't exist. Why not? Because what I said is something exists. What I said is, although something exists, none of the things that exist are Perseus. And I therefore have committed myself to the property being Perseus, but not to an individual who is Perseus. But now McX is saying, why is that any better than committing yourself to the individual? And Quine is going to provide a reply, and basically in his reply, he's going to deny the existence of properties as well. And we'll look at that next time.